control.
Subject 227 Atlantis.
Turn on the backup pumps. The backup pumps.
And pitch control.
200 hours, 13 minutes UTC. Altitude, plummeting. Speed, unreadable. Controls, locked in conflict. And the stall warning, screaming into the void. But inside the cockpit, there's only confusion. Silence. Then, what the hell are you doing? The captain's voice cuts through the tension, but it's already too late. In less than 4 minutes, a modern Airbus A330, cruising steadily at 35,000 feet, falls out of the sky. No explosion, no distress call, just a slow-motion free fall into one of the most remote stretches of ocean on Earth. 228 souls vanish, and for 2 years, the world has no idea why. The radar shows nothing. The ocean hides everything. When investigators finally piece together the truth, what they uncover changes aviation forever. What could cause a perfectly functioning aircraft with no mechanical failure to fall from the sky? This is not just a story of malfunction. It's a story of mystery, of missed cues, of pressure in the cockpit. So let's unravel, step by step, what really happened to Flight 447 and why it remains one of aviation's most haunting lessons. It began like any other overnight transatlantic flight. On May 31, 2009, Air France Flight 447 departed Rio de Janeiro bound for Paris. Aboard the Airbus A330-203 were 216 passengers and 12 crew. The aircraft, registration FGZCP, was well maintained and the crew experienced. For the first 3 hours, everything appeared normal. At 35,000 feet, the aircraft entered the intertropical convergence zone, a volatile stretch of atmosphere near the equator, known for towering storm systems and extreme turbulence. The flight crew adjusted their course slightly left to avoid the worst of the weather. But even this cautious move couldn't prevent what came next. They flew directly into a band of high-altitude, invisible ice crystals. And with that, the countdown began. At 200 hours 10 minutes UTC, a string of automatic ACARS messages began transmitting from the aircraft to maintenance teams on the ground. 5 failure reports, 19 warning messages, all within a matter of minutes. Buried in the noise was the first key clue: unreliable airspeed readings. Unknown to the crew at that moment, the plane's pitot tubes, the external sensors that read airspeed, had become clogged with ice. It was a subtle failure, one that required no flames, no smoke, no visible chaos. But in aviation, faulty data can be just as dangerous as no data. The airspeed indicators on the captain's and first officer's displays began showing inconsistent values. As a safety precaution, the aircraft's autopilot and autothrust systems disconnected, handing full manual control back to the pilots. The moment the automation vanished, the clock started ticking. And this time, it was ticking a little more faster. At cruising altitude, manual control of an airliner is rare. It's not something pilots often practice under stress. Worse, the disconnection of the autopilot also triggered a transition from normal law to alternate law, a degraded flight mode in the Airbus fly-by-wire system. In alternate law, many safety protections are lost. There's no automatic stall protection, no envelope protection to stop excessive pitch, no computer to step in when human hands go too far. And within seconds, human hands did go too far. First Officer Pierre-Cédric Bonin, the designated pilot flying, reacted instinctively. He pulled back on his side stick, raising the nose. Perhaps he believed the aircraft was descending too rapidly, or that turbulence meant they were dropping. But at this altitude, pulling the nose up without adequate thrust leads only one thing: into a stall. The aircraft began to climb rapidly, from 35,000 to nearly 38,000 feet in less than a minute. A stall warning sounded. Then again, but no corrective action was taken. In the right seat, Bonin kept his control stick fully back. In the left, co-pilot David Robert tried to push forward, attempting to lower the nose and break the stall. But in an Airbus A330, the side sticks don't move in unison. There's no visual feedback to tell one pilot what the other is doing. And when both inputs are made simultaneously, they're averaged out. Their inputs canceled each other. The aircraft did nothing. The system issued a dual input oral alert, but it went unacknowledged in the storm of confusion. Bonin, perhaps panicked, perhaps convinced he was correcting the aircraft, continued pulling. Robert, unsure of what Bonin saw or felt, didn't take control. Neither pilot called out a stall. Neither initiated stall recovery. The aircraft was stalling and no one in the cockpit realized it. By 200 hours 11 minutes, Captain Marc Dubois, who had been resting, is summoned back to the cockpit. He entered a space saturated in warnings and silence. The stall warning had now blared for over 50 seconds. The aircraft's nose was still high. The engines still at full thrust. The airspeed indicators still unreliable. And the descent had already begun. "What the hell are you doing?" Dubois asked. There was no answer. Not a confident report, not a structured handover, just confusion, just silence. Even the captain, an experienced pilot, couldn't piece together the unfolding crisis in time. The aircraft had already exited its flight envelope, the stall deepened, and the ocean raced closer. For the next 3 minutes, the plane fell in near vertical descent, descending at over 10,000 feet per minute. And descendant at such a rate, this meant only one thing. They had just a few of minuted left. The nose remained pitched 16 degrees up, an unnatural angle for an aircraft that was, in reality, plummeting toward the sea. It was a paradox. A jet that seemed to be climbing, but was in fact falling. An aircraft that was intact, functional, but unrecoverable. The stall warnings stopped briefly when the angle of attack became too high to register. But the stall persisted. The pilots never regained control. No mayday was sent. No cabin announcement made. The flight attendants were never warned. At 200 hours, 14 minutes, 28 seconds Coordinated Universal Time, the cockpit voice recorder falls silent. The aircraft struck the Atlantic Ocean tail first, still nose up. Impact was instantaneous. All 228 lives were lost. For days, the world searched. Oil slicks, seat cushions, a single vertical stabilizer floating upright in the water. But the black boxes were missing. The crash site lay 13,000 feet beneath the surface of the mid-Atlantic. No radar coverage, no GPS trail, no survivors. The mystery deepened. How does a modern airliner vanish mid-cruise without a single call for help? It would take 2 years to find the flight data recorders, 2 years of failed deep-sea searches, 2 years of families waiting, many with no bodies to bury. Finally, in May 2011, using underwater vehicles and advanced search modeling, investigators located the wreckage. The black boxes were recovered. Against all odds, they were intact, and the data told a harrowing story no one expected about the last minutes of the ill-fated plane, Flight 447. The aircraft had suffered no major structural failure. The engines were working. The controls responded. There had been no fire, no explosion, no hijacking. The cause of the crash? A mismanaged high-altitude stall, exacerbated by miscommunication, over-reliance on automation, and a breakdown in cockpit coordination. The pilots had the tools to recover, but not the clarity, not the training. And in the unforgiving sky, clarity is everything. The BEA investigation pointed to a chain of preventable failures. There was no mechanical defect that brought down Flight 447. Instead, it was pitot tube icing, a known issue. In fact, Airbus had recommended replacement of the older Thales models months earlier, but Air France hadn't yet completed the swap. A lack of training for high-altitude manual flight, an absence of clear stall recovery procedures tailored for cruise level, no angle of attack display, no stick feedback, no explicit stall alert during part of the descent, and perhaps most critically, a breakdown in cockpit communication. The pilots believed they were climbing right up until impact. Even in his final words, Bonin says, "We've been going nose up the whole time," and then silence. The human toll was staggering. Among the victims were business leaders, scientists, families, and crew. French, Brazilian, German, Chinese, South African, 33 nationalities lost someone that night. The first officer's wife was also on board, the captain, just months from retirement, a prince, a composer, entire families. It wasn't just a technical failure, it was a human catastrophe. In 2022, over a decade later, Air France and Airbus faced charges of involuntary manslaughter. Victims' families demanded accountability. The courtroom was filled with grief and with outrage. But in April 2023, both companies were acquitted. The court ruled there was no definitive causal link between corporate actions and the crash. For many families, it felt like another loss, another unanswered call. And yet, Flight 447 changed aviation forever. New standards for upset prevention and recovery training, UPRT, were adopted worldwide. Manual flying skills, once sidelined in favor of automation, are now back at the forefront of training. Pitot tubes were redesigned, cockpit interfaces were revised, and the push for real-time flight data streaming gained momentum. But perhaps the most important lesson was this: automation does not replace airmanship, it supports it. And in moments of crisis, it is the human in the loop who must understand the system and know when to take control. The story of Air France, Flight 447 isn't just a tragedy, it's a turning point. A stark reminder that even in the most advanced aircraft, human understanding remains critical. If we tell these stories carefully, truthfully, and in full, maybe we help prevent the next one. If you found this video informative, consider leaving a like. And if you want more stories that unpack the hidden lessons behind aviation's biggest moments, subscribe to the channel. We have more to explore.